So this evening, the Edmonton Oilers are going to retire the number 4 jersey number of Kevin Lowe. And quite frankly, I can't think of very many people who have ever been more deserving of this than Kevin Lowe. I mean, okay, there have been a few. I mean, Wayne Gretzky, arguably more deserving. Mark Messier, probably more deserving. But once you get past those two, I think that list starts to get pretty thin. And the reason why is you have to consider the sheer number of roles that Kevin Lowe has played for this hockey club over just decades of service. So for one thing, as a star player, he was with the team through all 5 Stanley Cups. Okay, this is nothing new. It's nothing surprising. You know, he did go on to accomplish other things after he left the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, he went on to the New York Rangers. He won another Stanley Cup there. He won 6 Stanley Cups, which on top of all of his other accomplishments, you know, not just in the NHL, but also in international hockey, got him into the Hall of Fame, which is really the reason why they are retiring this number. But the reason why Kevin Lowe deserves it so much goes even beyond all of that. I mean, all of that on its own, all of those things should get him into the Hall of Fame. You know, should get his jersey in the rafters of Rogers Place. But the reason why he is maybe more deserving of it than anybody else, because, I mean, at least in my opinion, I think that there probably wouldn't be an Edmonton Oilers today, you know, if not for Kevin Lowe. One thing that I have noticed on Twitter over the past several days is a lot of people that have been questioning exactly why it is that they are going to retire Kevin Lowe's number tonight. And, you know, really, I mean, it's, to a certain extent, it is a little bit difficult to really hold it against some of those people, because some of these people, you know, they're just, you know, they're youngins. You know, they're just youngins, they're just kids, they're just in their 20s, or maybe teenagers. They don't really know what it's been like to be an Edmonton Oilers fan for the entirety of this team's history, the way that a lot of other people do. You know, these are not people with real memories of what it was like to be an Edmonton Oilers fan, you know, throughout the 90s and through the early 2000s. You know, when the team was literally, you know, fending off all of these efforts to try to ship the team off to Houston, or to try to ship the team off to Oklahoma City, and things like that, and just trying to keep the team above water so that it could just stay alive in the league. And to try to keep the team competitive and try to keep the team winning while they were doing that. And when you look at the record, you know, between the years 1990 and 2006, and you look at the sheer number of years that came down to Kevin Lowe's ability to go out and take every little asset that the team had and shave everything down and try to make everything count. I don't think that there are very many places where you can look to credit, you know, just the existence of this team today, other than Kevin Lowe. Well, pardon me, you know what? Let me take that back. That's not necessarily true. I mean, the truth is, it was a handful of people. You know, it was a couple handfuls of people. I mean, of course, it was the Edmonton Oilers ownership group that bought the team from Peter Pocklington when, you know, he just didn't have it in him financially to stay in it anymore, and, you know, all things considered, it was probably for the best that he sold anyway. And so, yeah, okay, there was the money. Okay, money counts, money talks, all of these things are true. But I think that when you look beyond that, when you look at the 2 most important figures in keeping Edmonton Oilers hockey in Edmonton, it comes down to 2 people. It comes down to one hand. On one hand, you have Ryan Smith. Ryan Smith was a guy who had, you know, plenty of opportunities, you know, to jump ship and go someplace else where his talents, you know, probably would have been more lucrative for him in the long term. But he actually tried very hard to remain an Edmonton Oiler right up until the day that he was first traded in 2007. But for about a decade leading up to that, you had the guy that was assembling the team around Ryan Smith. You had Kevin Lowe. And fans who have become fans of this team within the past, you know, 5 to 10 years, you know, they surely do not understand this. But all the way back then, it was far easier said than done to put together a competitive team, because just about everything in hockey was stacked up against Kevin Lowe as he went out and tried to do this. He had to deal with, the teams out there that had a lot more money and could just come along and poach these players as, the moment that they were no longer restricted free agents. The moment they went unrestricted for a lot of these star players. For the Doug Waits and the Yanni Nienemas and the Roman Hammerlicks and the Bill Guerins. He was up against the New York Rangers. He was up against the Dallas Stars. He was up against the Colorado Avalanche, the big spenders in the league, the Detroit Red Wings. The teams with the deep pockets and all of the money that could just come in and scoop away all these players, unless Kevin Lowe found a way to try to make every little asset count and turn every little asset into a future asset. And as I've kind of mentioned before, I'm not entirely sure the team management always did succeed in that. I think that maybe there were a few things where you kind of look at it and say, well, as exciting as this was, and as exciting as things like Curtis Joseph in an Oilers jersey was for a few years, perhaps there might have been a better route. Really learn these things by looking back at them and looking at what all the alternatives were, and figuring out what the opportunity cost was. But the fact is that at no point were these easy decisions that Kevin Lowe was having to make. Trading Doug Weight to St. Louis? To me, that feels like it must have been an impossible decision for the team to make at that time. Trading Bill Guerin, sending him off to Boston. I couldn't imagine being the guy having to pull the trigger on that trade. Being the guy to say send Jason Arnott even to New Jersey. Could not have been easy. But because Kevin Lowe had it in him to do the most difficult things under the most difficult circumstances, these were the things that made the difference between the Oilers managing to make it to that big CBA renegotiation in 2005, 2006, the one that made the team long-term viable in the NHL as opposed to just, something that we might be able to, stretch out for a few more years. And whether or not you like any other decision that he has ever made in his tenure with the Oilers, Kevin Lowe was the guy that managed to get the team to that finish line. So today, Edmonton Oilers fans absolutely should not be on Twitter, even raising the question of whether or not Kevin Lowe's number 4 belongs in the rafters. We should be thanking him. And that's what Oilers fans are going to have the opportunity to do tonight. Personally, I'm really excited for it. Thank you, Kevin Lowe. We, Oilers fans, we all owe you a very deep gratitude.